And our word for today on this Thursday of the 30th week in Ordinary Time, this Thursday, October the 31st, our word for today, stand. Stand, our word for today, and here to talk about it, Andrew Reinhart. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Dave and Ron. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing great. Doing great. We're getting ready for a little trip here. We're heading to West Virginia today to celebrate my sister-in-law's 40th birthday.
Oh, wow. Almost heaven. Yeah, there you go. West Virginia is so beautiful. I hope you enjoy that trip.
I hope so, too. Well, you mentioned earlier the head into the mountain story, you bet you didn't know that. So I felt like I was, going to get a different experience. We're going to have a roof over our head.
Well,
I'll probably be the one cooking breakfast. But otherwise, it's probably about the same.
I don't know, and you won't have a 5-minute walk to the bathroom either.
Yeah, right.
No. Our word for the day is stand. This is from our first reading, but I wanted to start by lingering a bit on our gospel. And the theme, I guess, I want to get across is we stand, but we don't stand alone. In this gospel, there's this lamentation where Jesus is lamenting for Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is a deep and rich, obviously a real place, but also has deep and rich symbolic and theological meaning too. Jerusalem was, a place of righteousness. We hear the first time it's mentioned, most likely is with Melchizedek. It's mentioned that Melchizedek is the king of Salem. And many scholars think that Salem is Jerusalem. And later on, of course, Jerusalem becomes the capital city of David. But in the scripture, cities weren't always very good places. If you really look at Genesis closely, pretty much every time there's a city, something bad happens. You have the city around the Tower of Babel. You have the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. You have the city of Ur that Abram has to leave in order to follow God's will. And then once again, we end up in cities in Egypt. So there's all these kind of early scriptural references to cities being these places of great wickedness. But Jerusalem is kind of the exception. And the chosen people, it's almost like an experiment. It's like the city that's going to be redeemed, the city that's going to be holy, the city that's going to have the temple of the true God at its center. There's a sense here of a bit of a restoration of Eden. And the chosen people, I think, were aware of this. And if you read and study how the early temple was decorated, it was painted with a bunch of images of plants and verdancy and growth. And there was this kind of Eden connection with the temple. And David was meant to be a king like Adam was king before the fall. So there's this redemption of a certain form that's experienced in Jerusalem. And then, our God redeems it even further because we're being called into a city of God. And heaven is described as a new Jerusalem. So there's this kind of arc for the city in the scripture, all the way from the depths of wickedness after the fall to the heights of holiness and the new heavens and the new earth. So this lament over Jerusalem is in this context. He's lamenting Jerusalem because it had this high calling. It was called to be the example. It was called to be the place where the true God was worshipped. And this is important because we can't stand alone. So in our first reading, we have this image of, the Spirit kind of arming us and girding us and armoring us for the battle we're going to face. And we receive this order to stand firm, to persevere. But think, who has armor? Who has weapons? A military person. Right. And when you're in the military, you serve a king, you protect a city, but you also fight with your countrymen. Right? You fight shoulder to shoulder with those that you are with. So this is where we are today, in a sense. We live in various forms of cities that have various levels of wickedness, but also various levels of righteousness. Right? And we're not called to condemn the city or spurn the city. Maybe some of us are called out into the country, called out into maybe different forms of communal living or farming. But we're called to stand shoulder to shoulder in an effort to redeem the city. So as we're living our faith today, as we're putting on these various breastplates, this various armor, part of that calling is to redeem the place where we are. As Stephanie Sweeter likes to say, to put down roots and make the place holy. So our word for the day is stand.
And it just takes me where it takes me, right? So I'm thinking that shoulder to shoulder, Ireland. You remember that? But that song, but it speaks to us. We can't do it by ourselves. We need our brothers and sisters. And, of course, we need the Lord. Andrew Reinhart, we need you, brother. We appreciate your thoughts on our word for today. Not only today, but each and every Thursday. Lord bless you. Can't wait to be back with you next Thursday.
Have a great week, and God bless all.